Hi, welcome to the Frugal Frau. I'm Sukey, your host. And today we're going to show you how we make a marking gauge using mostly hand tools. But before we get started, please like, subscribe, comment, and if you have questions, please post those in the comment section too, and we will do our best to answer them. Now, before we actually start the process of showing you how we make it, I just wanted to describe an odd thing we've done here. We have made a kind of unique profile. It's sort of rhomboid shape. And the reason why we did that is because a lot of the other ones we have tend to wobble around or chatter a little bit, even when you've got the set screw tightened. So, and this is an example of one. This one wobbles a little bit more. And we found that the odd-shaped, the rhomboid shaped, helps keep it a little bit more stable, and it's a little bit easier to use. This is an old Stanley one from the 70s, and it also had a arc here and an arc there, probably like a 10-inch radius, and so it's a subtle thing on such a small piece, and I think that was part of the thinking of that design too. But this one's so worn out that now it wobbles even when it's tightened. So we don't use that one very much. So let's get started and we'll show you how we make this one. First, choose your stock and then flatten and square off all four faces to one another. This piece is going to be the piece for the shaft of the marking gauge. Tom is eyeballing the faces to see if they are flat and basically square. Since they are not, he's going to continue planing until he gets it flat. Do not skip this step of squaring off the edges with the faces. Check the squareness of the edges with the face using a small tri-square. Once the stock faces and edges are square with one another, measure the longer and shorter sides of the gauge shaft and mark with the point of a knife. Then use this mark to set the fence of a marking gauge that you already have and scribe the length of the shaft on each side. Here Tom is doing one of the sides. Then he repeats this on the other side. In this case, this is the smaller side. Mark the end of the shaft from the smaller to the larger side. Score it well. And then deepen the score line. This is how the end should appear at this stage. The gauge shaft is the right side in this photo. The little holes in the surface are just from the pins in the bench dog holders. The face scribes are deepened with a knife, then are further defined, as you see here, by cutting into them from the waist side. Do this on both of the faces. Next, using a rip saw, cut down the line marking the longer edge or side. Once the rip cut is complete, smooth and square off that edge with a plane. Use a caliper to check that the width is consistent down the entire length of the shaft, and then plane off as necessary if there are unevennesses or it's not perfectly square. Tom is checking the width with the caliper to make sure that it is consistent down the entire length of the shaft. And he's going to make some adjustments. Now he just rechecks it to make sure that the width is consistent. The stock is now a rectangular block as viewed from the edge. Tom made a marking reference line just shy of the longer edge and he places the stock in the vise to chisel off the majority of the waste. He is careful not to chisel past that top reference line or chisel past the line that is facing him when the stock is in the vise. I made this diagram to clarify this step. The red area is the waste to be chiseled off, but don't try to chisel this exactly to the scribe lines. The final cuts will be made with a plane and, if necessary, a scraper blade. I included this photo just to show you how close Tom gets to the scribe line with his chisel. After most of the waste has been removed, start carefully planing down from the uppermost corner down to the scribe line. And here I just show a different angle of this process of planing down to the scribe line. Now Tom has switched to his regular smoothing plane for the final planing refinements. Tom uses the caliper to check that the distances A to B, C to D, and B to D are each respectively the same throughout the entire length of the shaft. He is pleased that indeed they are respectively the same distance throughout the entire length of the shaft. Tom is making some center marks so that he can center the shaft along the fence. Line up the shaft with the index marks so that it's pleasing to the eye, and then simply just scribe around the perimeter of that end. And I have provided this drawing so that you can see how that all lines up, and you can see that the perimeter of the shaft has that rhomboid shape, and you can see the approximate measurements of all of it. Use a chisel to define that outline even further, making sure you keep the flat end towards the outsides of the hole that you're going to cut for the shaft to travel through. To make the hole for the shaft, chisel into the marked lines and gradually take away the excess material, working back and forth, going vertically and then into the vertical cuts. This is a tedious process and will take quite a bit of time. Don't try to cut all the way through to the other side when you do this. Cut almost to the other side and then start test fitting the shaft into the cut. You want to make sure you don't overcut this at this point. When approaching the side, so as not to cut all the way through right away, just make little cuts at right angles to each other, and that just slowly eliminates a little bit of excess material without going all the way through. Just flick away the debris as you needed to do and blow out the little bits. And just keep working slowly. When you get to the point where you're breaking through the other side, cease using the chisel and start cleaning it out with a knife. And this ensures that you do not overcut, as you have already test fit the shaft into this fence blank. Now, Once you've done that, you can start cleaning up the edge because you've gotten very close with the knife, and you can just go vertically straight down to cut away that last little bit. Be very careful as you approach that acute or less than 90-degree angle here at the upper left of the cutting area. Continue to test fit your shaft so you don't overcut and make it too loose. Adjust as necessary. Here, Tom is marking some tighter spots with a pencil, and those are areas he's going to have to gently carve away. He's switched to a smaller chisel to do this. Continue to test fit the shaft into the fence. At this point, it's very tight, and perhaps it's the shaft that now needs to be finely tuned. To begin fine-tuning the shaft, he uses a scraper blade to scrape down little areas that are sticking in the fence. And this again is a tedious process, and you'll have to go back and forth many times to get this to slide just right. You don't want it to slide too loosely, but on the other hand, you don't want it to slide too tightly. Remember though, with use it will loosen up a little bit, so make it a little tight to begin with. And this is just another view of using the scraper blade to refine the shaft. You can see he's taking barely any off, but that's what you need to do to make this work correctly. Tom is using a hand drill to make the hole for the marking pin. He has marked the depth to drill with a piece of tape. Make sure that the drill bit is smaller than the nail which you are going to use to make your pin, as shown in the little picture to the lower left of the screen. Clean up the drill hole with a knife just to get the little ditzels off the edge. Now cut the head off the nail and stick it in the hole. Make sure it fits snugly and tap it in gently with a hammer. It should stick out about 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch, and next you just have to sharpen it and simply take a file and go around all sides of it to sharpen it. Make sure you test it on a scrap to make sure it makes an adequate scratch mark. Drill a 3/8 inch starter hole for a 1/4 by 20 thread insert in the center position of the top edge of the fence. This is the blue-gray shaded area in the diagram. Use a hole drilling jig or a drill press, depending on your preference, or freehand if you're really good, to drill this hole all the way into that space where the shaft is going to be inserted. You can shape the fence however you please, and I just chose to make arcs on the corners to round it off to make it easier for my hand to grasp this marking gauge. Here you can see that one of the arcs has already been rough cut. Our process for doing this is to saw from the top to close to the marked curve along a few vertical lines. Next, just chisel away these cuts, and that gets you the rough cut of the curve. If you want the curved edge square to the faces, check for the square. If not, you can just round it off as you see fit. Smooth out the curve with a scraper blade. Use a chisel to just get any stubborn edges off. Be gentle. And continue to smooth out edges with the scraper blade. How far you take this is up to you and what feels good to your hand when you complete the fence. Here, Tom is inserting the 1/4 by 20 thread insert into the hole that was drilled into the top of the fence. Check to make sure your thumb screw fits. We used a 1.5 inch thumb screw for this project, and that is appropriate for the dimensions that we used that were shown in the previous drawings. Now apply a finish to your fence and also to the shaft. Here I'm just using our 333 mixture, which is 1/3 paint thinner, 1/3 linseed oil, and 1/3 spar varnish. And I put it on rather thickly, and I just let it soak in, and then after a little bit I'll wipe off some of the excess. And here is a nice photo of the finished marking gauge.